and grain made that possible. This is the quiet truth behind Rome's power. Not just armies, not just politics, but the humble grain that appeared on tables every single day. Without it, the empire would not have stood for centuries. Without it, history would have taken a very different path. And yet, most people never think about it. Because grain does not look impressive. It does not feel dramatic. It does not appear in statues or triumphal arches. But it was there. Every day. In every home. In every soldier's ration. In every worker's meal. And it quietly shaped one of the most powerful civilizations in history. As the Roman Empire expanded, its dependence on grain did not decrease. It increased. Because every new territory brought more people, more cities, more soldiers, more mouths to feed. And the system that worked for a small republic now had to sustain a civilization stretching across continents. From Britain in the north, to Egypt in the south, from Spain in the west, to the edges of Mesopotamia in the east. At the heart of this enormous structure was still the same simple need: food. And grain remained the solution. Rome's survival depended on something few people ever saw in full: a massive logistical network. Ships crossing the Mediterranean, warehouses filled with grain, roads connecting distant provinces, officials managing distribution, and constant coordination to ensure that food reached where it was needed. It was not glamorous work, but it was essential. Because a city like Rome could not grow without a reliable flow of grain, and a military empire could not function without feeding its soldiers. The importance of grain became so central that it influenced politics itself. Controlling food supply meant controlling stability. Rulers understood that if grain deliveries were interrupted, unrest could follow quickly. A hungry population does not remain quiet for long. So grain distribution became not only an economic system, but a political one. It helped maintain order. It helped prevent chaos. And it helped keep the empire together. For ordinary Romans, however, grain was not a symbol of power. It was simply life. Every morning began with routine. Grain ground into flour. Water heated over fire. Simple ingredients combined into porridge or bread. Meals were repetitive, but dependable. And that dependability mattered more than variety. Because survival rarely depends on luxury. It depends on consistency. In wealthier households, grain was still present, but often transformed. Bread became more refined. Recipes became more elaborate. Additional ingredients were added when available. But even in rich homes, grain remained the foundation of the meal. It was the base that everything else depended on. In poorer homes, grain was often the only stable food, stretching limited resources across entire families. A single batch of porridge could sustain multiple people. A single loaf of bread could last through the day. Nothing was wasted. Everything was used. And this efficiency is part of why Rome endured for so long. The empire understood something fundamental. You cannot maintain power without maintaining food supply. As centuries passed, grain continued to shape Roman identity. Soldiers carried it across distant frontiers. Farmers cultivated it across vast estates. Merchants traded it across the Mediterranean. And citizens relied on it every single day. Even during periods of political instability, grain remained a constant. Empires rose and fell. Emperors changed. Wars reshaped borders. But grain continued its quiet role in sustaining life. In many ways, it was more stable than the empire itself. There is a certain irony in this. The grandeur of Rome is often remembered through architecture and conquest. But the true foundation was far more modest. A bowl of grain. A loaf of bread. A simple porridge eaten at dawn. This simplicity is what made it powerful. Because it could be replicated everywhere. It did not require rare ingredients. It did not depend on luxury trade. It could be produced in nearly every province of the empire. And that meant it could reach nearly every person. This universality is what made grain so important. It connected people across regions, across cultures, across social classes. Everyone needed it. Everyone relied on it. And everyone understood its value. As the empire matured, grain distribution systems became more complex. Large shipments moved regularly across sea routes. State-managed storage ensured reserves were available during shortages. Public distributions helped maintain stability in the capital. These systems were not perfect. There were shortages, delays, political tensions. But overall, they worked well enough to support an enormous population. And that was enough for Rome to endure. But over time, even the strongest systems faced pressure. Political instability increased. Economic strain grew. External invasions began to challenge borders. And the grain networks that once functioned smoothly became harder to maintain. When supply weakened, consequences followed quickly. Because a civilization built on grain cannot function without it. Food insecurity leads to unrest. Unrest leads to instability. And instability weakens even the strongest empire. Eventually, the system that had sustained Rome for centuries began to fragment. But the legacy of grain did not disappear. It remained deeply embedded in European food culture. Bread, porridge, and grain-based meals continued long after the fall of the empire. Because habits formed over centuries do not vanish easily. They evolve. They adapt. And they survive in new forms. Even today, in many parts of the world, grain remains one of the most important staples of daily life. Bread is still present at tables across continents. Porridge still appears in countless variations. Rice, wheat, and other grains still form the foundation of global diets. In this way, the Roman story did not end. It transformed. What began as a survival necessity became cultural heritage. A simple food that once held an empire together continues to sustain humanity in countless forms. And perhaps that is the most important lesson hidden in Roman history. Great civilizations are not built only on extraordinary achievements. They are built on ordinary things used consistently over time. Grain did not create Rome, but it made Rome possible. It supported its armies. It fed its citizens. It stabilized its cities. And it quietly shaped the rhythm of daily life for millions of people. Without it, the empire would not have lasted. With it, it became one of the most influential civilizations in history. And all of it began with something simple: a daily meal, prepared again and again, without interruption, for centuries.